Mirë se erdhët në Public Square, unë jam Ditmir Bushati. Donald Trump u rikthye në Shtëpinë e Bardhë duke konfirmuar trendin që është vënë re në këtë vit zgjedhor, ku njerëzit pothuajse anë mban botës kanë zgjedhur ndryshimin përkundrejt atyre që janë në detyrë. Shumë po përpiqen për të analizuar bardhëzi këtë ngjarje me përmasa të rëndësishme jo thjesht për amerikanët, por për mbar botën, edhe pse është ende herët dhe pse Donald Trump nuk ka filluar zyrtarisht ende detyrën si president i Shtetit Bashkuar të Amerikës. Për të kuptuar disa nga aspektet më të rëndësishme dhe ndryshimet e pritshme jo vetëm në skenën politike amerikane, por ndikimin në Europë dhe në këtë kënd të Europës në Ballkanin Perëndimor, sot kam të ftuar Edward nga Shkolla për Studime të Thelluara Ndërkombëtare të Johns Hopkins. Edward është një ekspert me eksperiencë mjaft gjatë në rajonin tonë, pasi ka shërbyer për shumë organizata ndërkombëtare dhe së fundmi shkruan analizat shumta dhe merr pjesë në forumet ndryshme që zhvillohen për sa i përket rajonit tonë dhe raporteve të tij me Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës. Welcome to Public Square, Edward.
Great to be here with you, Ditmir.
Let me start our conversation by asking you a question in relation to the main takeaways from the US election, but viewed from a domestic perspective, not from an international one. How this outcome is seen in the US?
So your question is a great one, okay, to start. What is the way, the takeaways here in the United States for this election? And again, there are many. Mine are these. First, we have to confront the reality that Donald Trump is a prominent and permanent feature of US politics. In other words, before this recent election, he could be seen historically as an aberration, as someone who got into office, beat Hillary Clinton by some bad campaigning, and lost the popular vote to her, and through some various things managed to become president and had a strange and very contentious presidency before the voters voted him out convincingly, then in a close election by Joe Biden. So we could have thought of Trump in that way, but not anymore. That's gone. Trump is no longer an aberration. He is a reflection. He's a reflection of a considerable standpoint of a near majority of American voters. He has almost 50%, not quite, but almost 50% of the votes. So he clearly reflects something of the American public, of the American society. He reflects that. And so we have to confront that point. We can no longer say, Trump was just this aberrational figure. That's number one. Number two is we have to confront another reality. As we look forward, the second Trump administration is not the same as the first Trump administration. There are several reasons for this. Okay, number one, and most important, is that the voters, unlike in 2016, and as they did not do in 2020, American voters validated Donald Trump. They validated. Everything is known about Donald Trump. His record in office is known. His statements afterwards, the prosecutions that were brought by him, even the campaign by Kamala Harris, it focused very much on the threat that Donald Trump represents to American democracy, but his penchant for going after enemies. The fact even his own former chief of staff, General John Kelly, retired Marine general, who was his longest serving chief of staff, who saw him on a daily basis. He warned, very unusually for a former American general to say this. He said that he considers Donald Trump a fascist. Kamala Harris repeated this. So no voters can say, oh, well, we weren't aware of who he was. Yet they validated him. So that's the second point here. So he comes into office having been validated, and he feels then more vindicated. He has wholesale control of the Republican Party. He already had very strong, but now wholesale, demanding of absolute loyalty. A third reason, he has brimming with self-confidence. This is in some ways a remarkable, if not historic, victory. To have been voted out of office and then come back in, that's a remarkable achievement. He did that. People are raving about that. In some ways, they even use the term that he's like a king in the party. Other points that are different. He has a wider base of support than he did before. He has, for example, a strong backing in the tech industry. There are elements within the, not wholly, but there are elements within the tech industry. He has business enterprises now, like this Trump media, that reflect his standing. So his financial interest is directly tied also to being president. And another example, he has experience having been president, experience with what he considers to be the deep state. And he knows much more about utilizing the levers of power. And of course, that creates additional dangers. That's like what Viktor Orban did. He had served as prime minister when he came, and then lost. When he came back, he knew where the levers of power were that he wanted to control. So we have a stronger constitutional system with stronger separation of powers, but we know that Donald Trump has the advantage of knowing, having been through that experience in the past. And one final one, so obvious that many people overlook it. Donald Trump has a different vice president, very different, in J.D. Vance from Mike Pence. J.D. Vance, much more ideologically oriented to advance the Trump agenda than was Mike Pence, who, by the way, played some significant role in the Balkans. So those are the two main areas to start, Ditmir, that we take away. And then the third, of course, is the reaction for the Democratic Party. And on that, there's a lot that we can say, but it's really too soon to voice a clear opinion about why Kamala Harris lost.
Do you think he will deliver on what he promised during the campaign in relation to DOJ and State Department and deep state?
I think he considers these people in the government, who others would say are loyal civil servants, as the enemy. And he also wants to go after those who he really considers enemy, his political opponents, this prosecutor Jack Smith, and others. He may instrumentalize and use the instruments of government to go after enemies. And he doesn't want civil servants telling him, no, you can't do that.
This time we have seen a huge impact of Elon Musk and a fierce competition between social networks and traditional media. What would be the consequences for the American democracy, the involvement of the so-called techno-feudals, lords in the political scene? What's your impression?
First of all, we have a very interesting policy issue for Trump when it comes to electric vehicles, because Trump is considering regulations that would take away the subsidy for electric vehicles. So it will, and that would be damaging for the sales, including the sales of Tesla. So already I have a question: how is this relationship going to play out? The second is, look, Musk will not be in a cabinet position, but he will be in some position of influence. He's part of this, what they're calling, it's not really a department, it's just basically an appointment on government efficiency with this Vivek Ramaswamy. And I don't know how serious that operation will be. Third, you mentioned about the advent of social media, these are forces that have been at play for well over a decade now, more 15, 20 years now. And this just continues. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, Trump has his own Trump media. So he has his own entity, his own social media network that's financial and that's the stock is traded. And Trump has a financial interest in continuing that. And to some degree, that's a competitor to Musk's own platform, although obviously ideologically aligned. So I don't know that I see some dramatic change there. Those forces, the dwindling reach of the so-called traditional media and the advent of social media, those are long-standing forces.
He's coming into office and the world is facing at least two major conflicts. The one in Europe, Russia's aggression in Ukraine, and the other one in the Middle East. On the first front, on European front, he promised that he will end the war within a day. What's your take on this? What are the real chances of securing a durable peace or a durable ceasefire?
I would, the way I approach international relations, questions of foreign policy, is I always look at interests first. So what is Trump's interest? Trump's interest, of course, obviously always begins first, last, always is himself. So how does he look? That's first, last, and always. Second, how does the Trump team, including Donald Trump, tend to look at the world and to look at Russia's aggression against Ukraine, the war in Ukraine launched by Russia? How do they look at that? They have a China focus. So we have to understand that. That's their worldview is China is the main threat. A lot of Democrats share that view, by the way. But the difference is Democrats see the war in Ukraine as a test that China will be watching. A test. Democrats see the war as a test of our commitment to our ideals, our unity, which is our transatlantic unity and our principles, which is what makes us strong in the world and able to counter the threat from China. That's how Democrats see it, as a test of that. How does Trump and Trump world see it? As a distraction. Democrats see it as a test of our fortitude, our unity, the things that make us strong against the threat from China, while Trump world sees it as a distraction. You see, we're using up all of our ammunition, our stocks for ourselves. If we have to go into a war with China, are dwindling. The outcome is not being changed. The front line of Ukraine is not gaining territory. This is a waste, and it's raising the prospect of World War III, that we will get into some nuclear confrontation with Russia, which would be catastrophic. So this is that worry also among President Biden and Democrats, but in a different realm as a test, whereas for Trump, it's a distraction. So that's the way he's going to approach this. Now, that being said, you see this as a distraction. You want to focus on China, even though the terms, China will see the terms that you're settling on. And if you cave into Putin, then China will think you'll cave in on Taiwan as well. But they're less concerned about that. So they see this distraction element. And obviously, Trump has an affinity with Putin. You know, we don't know what they even talked about in that famous private meeting in Helsinki, when there was no US official with Trump, no interpreter even. So there's a lot of things that we just don't know about Donald Trump and his relationship. But finally, let's say they do want to come into office and finish the war in a day or a week or a month or 2 months. Let's say that they really say, let's finish this war. How are they going to do it? Because simply stopping the war where it is now and having some kind of a ceasefire, and that's the agreement, that's not what Donald Trump wants, or Vladimir Putin wants. That's not what Vladimir Putin wants. He wants to show a victory. And so this assumption that the Trump people are just going to come in and, okay, we'll cut off the weapons to Ukraine, so they will have to give in, and Putin will accept some kind of like ceasefire, sort of on the where they more or less are, without validating a Russian victory, is going to be very hard. And so then you come into, well, what if they just want to give in and let Putin have the victory? Then we'll see the political cost that Donald Trump might pay here back home, and then we'll see whether Republicans in the Senate would go along with that, or whether he would see that he would pay a political price to just completely sell out Ukraine, and whether senators and others who might register with Trump would penetrate him and maybe his own advisors, someone like Marco Rubio, to tell him, you're increasing the Chinese threat if you just cave in to Putin this way.
How do you see the incoming Trump presidency vis-a-vis NATO allies in Europe?
We don't know the answer to that, and that's one of the questions. We have a list of questions about Trump. We can't be here, making accurate predictions. We don't know. We know Trump doesn't really like alliances to begin with. He doesn't put value in it. That's really the point here. It wasn't just, well, you're not paying your fair share. It's his whole posture, his attitude towards alliances. That America first. Even the concept. It's in and of itself. It's signaling negligence towards alliances. That these are annoying and troublesome. These are freeloaders, free riders who don't step up. We don't really need them. We don't really need to consult them. So he doesn't act in the spirit of an ally. And he doesn't understand, of course, or appreciate the benefits that the United States gets from being the leader of an alliance like NATO. So those are the things that we know. What he will actually do, Ditmir, I'm sorry, we just don't know.
What would be the European reaction in terms of the tariffs that he is going to impose on European products? Because when it comes to the tariffs, I think also their staunchest supporters, such as Viktor Orban within European Union, are being affected somehow. Do you expect a major European organization and the European alignment in this respect?
Well, look, the classic thing, if you know, anyone who knows anything about how trade dynamics work, is tariffs beget tariffs. That's why we get the term trade war. That's what it comes. It's a trade war. It's like seen as a hostile action, which then produces another hostile action in return. Now, will Trump actually go through with this once that's explained to him, and when he sees the cost of that? Again, that remains to be seen. This is a very impulsive and unpredictable person. And by the way, he prides himself. He knows that about himself. Most leaders try to present themselves as consistent, constant. And when they're caught out, they try to sort of smooth it over, that no, I'm being consistent here. Trump doesn't care about that. That's one of the things that makes him very unusual. He doesn't really care if he changes his mind and says something one day and does something else another day. So that's it. The wider question is, of course, that the trade tariffs are mainly for China. That's what Trump, where he would like to deploy tariffs, but he likes tariffs. He said tariff is the most beautiful word in the English language. So he thinks that this is a tool that the other countries need, the access to the US market, but that remains to be seen. How the reaction in Europe, we don't know. Again, the classic reflex is to have a trade war.
When it comes to the Western Balkans or Southeast Europe in a bit wider sense, and you know it also from your experience in the ground, US is seen traditionally as enforcer of security perimeter, whereas Europeans allergic to the force, to the use of force. What would be the repercussions of a disengagement of US from our region in security and democracy terms?
Ditmir, you're absolutely right. The US is the linchpin. It's the foundation for stability in the region, because it's the US guarantee expressed through the security guarantee expressed through NATO that is really underlies the stability in the region and puts an immediate cap on everyone from truly attempting to try major escalation. It's not 100% because we saw what Belgrade did with Banska, which is a very serious example in September 2023. So just a little over a year ago. So we saw that there can be, even where paid for, NATO is present, that there can be these attempts to use insurrection as a means of dramatically changing the political dynamics. So you're right. That's the underpinning is this firm U.S. commitment. Now, will Trump change that on day one? Well, one of the things we know that he will change, and we already see this, the impact, is on the commitment to values, because there's the security component on which the region relies, the U.S./NATO security commitment, and of course, then there's the values and commitment to democratic coexistence and democratic institutions. And okay, in the first Trump administration, they didn't remove the funding for everything on this, and many of these things continued. But I don't know if we can say that. And we certainly know that leaders, autocratic leaders like Viktor Orban and Alexander Vučić and others are openly celebrating the Trump win. And they believe that this will end what they see as this lecturing and moralizing by the U.S. about the democratic values, and other leaders in the region will be seeing that. Of course, in Tirana, Prime Minister Rama will see that. In Skopje, Prime Minister Mickoski, all the leaders in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Montenegro and Kosovo, everyone will be seeing and perceiving that. Now, will it mean some immediate change on the ground? We would have to talk more about that.
There is, you mentioned celebrations in Southeast Europe, but also in Eastern Europe, starting with Viktor Orban in Budapest, but also in celebrations in Belgrade and Banja Luka, in Skopje. So there is this kind of black and white analysis in our region about the new Trump administration. And let me offer you some of the expectations that some politicians have in our region. First, there is an expectations by those who are in power, by the incumbents, that their hands will be freer, especially with judiciary, with media and civil society groups. Second, there is an expectation that there will be a revision the sanctioned list provided by State Department. You have people like Milorad Dodik, for instance, who was put under sanctions list during the first administration of Donald Trump. Third, there is an expectation that the Special Tribunal in The Hague, the Special Tribunal on Kosovo, will be dismantled, and the American prosecutors will be removed from office. And fourth, there is also an expectation that the Balkan somehow could be used as a playground or as a test for rapprochement with Russia or other major powers in the world. So, how do you see all these expectations?
Answer them in order, and I'm going to mention one more at the beginning. I'll mention this additional one. So the first one is that I would mention in addition to your list, which is 4. You've named 4, and I have them noted here. I'll address them in turn. The first is what I believe Alexander Vučić thinks that he has attained with the election of Trump, which is access. So that's very important. So I believe that Vučić believes that he may have even said that they will have access, and they may have access. Okay, on that and the extent of that access, and this influences those other questions as well. It depends on through whom. So I don't know that Vučić can just phone Trump whenever he wants. That's not really going to happen. But this is where the name Richard Grenell comes in, and we still don't know where he fits in on this. We don't know how prominent the power dynamics will be with Marco Rubio, who presumably will pass and will be Secretary of State, and how much he will have his own authority and control on the Balkans portfolio and influence. So we don't know that. And we don't know if there were some test between Rubio and Grenell or someone else, how that would come out there, how much Rubio would actually fight for policy on the Balkans. I will tell you, when Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State, there were fights over this. There were disagreements, including on one of the issues you mentioned, which was the specialist chambers in The Hague. And so we don't know. We don't know if Rubio will be engaged on this, or if what role Grenell will play, or how much interest. But the main point is that Serbia certainly believes, and I don't know, perhaps even Dodik may believe that overall that there will be increased access. That's number one. Hands freer on democracy, that is largely likely to be the place, to be the case, that yes, they're certainly not going to be emphasizing that as much, and we don't know how committed they are to the agenda of rolling back assistance programs that are in the realm of democracy. That's something, with this Project 2025 and so forth. These are the more ideological components. We don't know how much they're committed, or maybe they just won't care and will let USAID and these others continue to do what they want and just simply not be bothered. So we don't know very much, but it's very likely that this administration, symbolically and policy, probably on policy, it will not be pressing on democratic aims, and therefore, yes, autocrats will likely have a freer hand. Yes, sanctions list revision. Here's my question about that. Trump is a deal maker. Grenell is a deal maker. Yes, they have a close. Grenell obviously has some. He's been very favorable and spending time in Belgrade and some other capitals, and he's harshly criticized Albin Kurti. So Could he raise it? Yes, but I have a wider question. Why would even Grinnell do it? They're deal makers. Why would they do this for free? What would Trump get out of this is really the question there, when, in my opinion. That they would come in and just simply do this, I'm not so sure. It's not impossible, but I'm not so sure that they would just do this without wanting something or cutting some kind of a deal. But I could be wrong on other things in the first Trump administration. They did do things sometimes and not get anything for it. Donald Trump, again, a very impulsive type of negotiator when it comes to that. The Specialist Tribunal, what's interesting here is, yes, probably could be on the list of things to cut as part of a deal, but Albin Kurti is not Hashim Thaçi, so the nature of that deal, what would that be? But there is another reason and another motive, is Jack Smith. So it was Jack Smith who, intentionally or not, blocked the deal that was meant to be happen in July of 2020, when he made public the indictment of Hashim Thaçi, and that messed everything up. And then Jack Smith left the specialist chambers to become the prosecutor against Trump over the riots and also the classified documents. And Donald Trump has been very clear about going after Jack Smith. So maybe they would link the two, and like as a revenge, want to just take down Jack Smith's former office there in The Hague. So that's a possibility. We don't know. This is a speculation. And finally, you said the Balkans as some test for rapprochement with Russia. It could be that. It's possible. It could be that in the context of a negotiation with Ukraine, there's an understanding, but it's more likely, or more typical, I shouldn't say more. With Trump, there's no such thing as likely. Let's say the more typical would be, and what Putin would probably be suggesting is not that he gets a freer hand in the Balkans, but the opposite. So what Putin would like to do is he would like to trade Kosovo for Crimea, for example, and the Donbass. He would like to sell out Kosovo and sell out Serbia in his idea, if it could get him the U.S. Essentially formal acknowledgement of the annexation of Crimea and other territories of Ukraine. So that's a scenario. Now, the other scenario is that they don't talk about the Balkans at all, and that Trump simply cuts a deal with Putin on Ukraine, like we talked about, and he caves in essentially, and that would have the opposite. That would have a devastating impact on the Balkans, because then truly you would have Vučić and others who would be emboldened. This would be validating that whole approach of ethno-territorial aggression and division of multi-ethnic countries. So that's another scenario here. They could simply not talk about the Balkans at all and just simply cut their deal in Russia, Ukraine, and then Serbia would have the benefit of that outcome, and Russia would have the benefit of that outcome in the Balkans.
And this brings me to the final question of our conversation. During the first Trump administration, there has been 2 milestone agreements reached in the Balkans. First, Prespa agreement, and the other one, the agreement between Kosovo, Serbia, and US, the economic normalization agreement that ensured in return also a recognition of Kosovo by Israel. Do you see any a possibility that the incoming administration will use these two agreements as a stepping stone for addressing the remaining conflicts in our region?
No, no, I don't see that. I think you're right, Ditmir, to point to them, because you remember at the beginning when I said some among the differences are we had Mike Pence and J.D. Vance, and it was Mike Pence who actually played a behind-the-scenes role on the PRESPA agreement. But I don't see. They never really went out of their way, the Trump administration, to take credit and really try to give some credit to Trump for this. They did that for the Washington agreement, which was the one you're referring to. That is the one where Israeli recognition came into it. I don't. Now, there's some possibility that maybe they would like to revive the Washington agreement and, pursue economic and infrastructure projects, economic projects and initiatives, and infrastructure. That's certainly possible. That's something that they believed in. Grinnell was pushing that. That's the thrust of the Washington Agreement, September 2020, between President Vučić and then Prime Minister Abdullah Hoti. And we see, even today, we see that former Prime Minister Hoti is advocating that. He's advocating going back to the Washington Agreement and doing the big infrastructure projects and focusing on the economy. So it's possible that a Trump administration could return to this and say, hey, this was the Trump's legacy from the first round. Let's continue with this. And try to revive Open Balkans, which had been overtaken, thankfully, by Berlin process, and of course, which Belgrade wants, because it's outside the realm of EU and German and CEFTA supervision. This is completely outside. But so they, yes, but I don't see the PRESPA agreement or this mutual recognition between Kosovo and Israel as something to be developed. What was interesting about the Israeli recognition is that the Serbian-Israeli relationship has survived that they still have a strong relationship between Serbia and Israel, and that has not really damaged it, and nor has Kosovo been really damaged in its relations with other countries like Turkey that were annoyed at first, but now seem to have gotten over that.
Edward, it was a pleasure to have you on.
Ditmir, it was my honor. It's not every day that I get this chance to answer the questions of a respected former foreign minister of a very significant country in Southeastern Europe, Albania. And it was really a pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.